Sitting in my studio, surrounded by brushes, paints, and unfinished canvases, I observed the chaos that had become my creative life. The walls, once vibrant with the colors of my works, now felt oppressive, as if they were suffocating me. The paintings that surrounded me were silent witnesses to a talent I had not dared to fully explore. The smell of fresh paint mingled with the dust of years, and I felt a knot in my stomach at the thought of how many opportunities I had let slip away. Looking at the blank canvas before me, a wave of frustration washed over me. Why couldn't I take the first step? The image of the world I had always dreamed of painting danced in my mind, but I remained here, trapped in my village, in a cycle of regret and disillusionment. If only I had traveled, if only I had followed what my heart truly desired, I thought. I fondly remembered the days of my childhood when I ran alongside my grandfather, Lao, a man who inspired me to see the world through colors and art. He always said, "Hui, life is like a blank canvas. You need to dare to paint it with your own colors, even if you are afraid of making mistakes." Hearing those words, I felt invincible, as if I could conquer any challenge. But now, his voice echoed in my mind like a distant whisper, a reminder of a time when courage pulsed through my veins. "Why don't I travel, grandfather?" I murmured to myself, as if he could hear my plea. Why did I let myself stay here, trapped in this place? The frustration turned into a shadow that followed me, and I knew I needed a change. I decided it was time to tidy up the studio a bit. As I organized things, I found an old box in a corner, covered in dust. What could be inside? Curious, I dragged it to the center of the room and opened it. Inside was a collection of antique objects, some dried paints and a sketchbook filled with doodles. But what really caught my attention was a yellowed letter, carefully folded, that seemed to have been there for a long time. With my hands trembling with anticipation, I took the letter and unfolded it. The words, written in elegant handwriting, belonged to my grandfather. As I began to read, each line seemed to fill a void in my heart. "My dear Hui," the letter began, and I could almost hear his voice in my mind. "Life is a journey full of choices. Often, we are afraid to follow our hearts, and that is understandable. But remember, my grandson, what matters is not the choices we make, but how we deal with the consequences of them." The words flowed like a river, and I lost myself in those reflections. He spoke about the importance of embracing uncertainty, of not fearing the challenges life presents us. "Travel, paint, love, and live intensely," he said. "Do not be afraid of making mistakes, for each mistake is a lesson that teaches us to be stronger and wiser." As I read, tears formed in my eyes. I felt a wave of emotion, a mix of nostalgia and hope. It was as if my grandfather were there beside me, encouraging me to leave behind the fears that imprisoned me. If he could follow his dreams, why can't I thought. The letter became a beacon amid my darkness, and the passion I thought I had lost began to reignite within me. With my heart racing, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, feeling courage blossom again. It was time to change. My grandfather's words echoed in my mind, and I realized that life could wait no longer. But at the same time, a shadow of doubt began to haunt my thoughts. What if it's too late? What if what I want isn't what I really need? The weight of my past choices began to accumulate over me like a storm approaching. I stood up and went to the window, looking out at the village I knew so well. The red-roofed houses, the green fields, and the mountains in the background seemed familiar, but at the same time, I felt there was a world out there waiting for me, a world I had set aside for too long. Gazing at the horizon, I envisioned the landscapes I had always dreamed of capturing with my paints, paintings of places I had never known, of people whose stories I had yet to hear. I decided I needed to talk to someone who understood me. May, my childhood friend, had always been a source of inspiration and support. I took the letter and carefully placed it back in the box, closing it like a secret to be shared. I left the studio with a new purpose, determined to find May and reveal to her what I had discovered. I walked through the village streets, feeling the gentle breeze on my face. Each step felt lighter, as if the chains that bound me were dissolving. Upon reaching the small square, I found May sitting on a bench, watching the children play. Her smile lit up my world, and for a moment, all my insecurities vanished. "Hui!" she exclaimed, getting up to greet me. "You look different. What happened?" With a shy smile, I sat down beside her. "I found something that belonged to my grandfather," I began, and the emotion showed in my voice. "A letter full of advice on living life fully. I feel it's time to change, to follow what I really want." "That's wonderful," May replied, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "What are you waiting for? You should go after your dreams." "But what if I can't? What if I fail?" The question slipped from my lips before I could contain it. She looked at me seriously. "Hui, we all have fears, but living with regrets is a much heavier burden to bear. If you don't try, you'll never know what could have been. Don't let fear define your choices." Those words resonated within me like a call. After all, what did I really desire? What was my heart begging for? We talked for a while, and with each exchanged word, I felt lighter, closer to the decision I needed to make. Deep down, a spark of hope began to ignite. I still didn't know exactly what the next steps would be, but one thing was clear. The journey that had begun within me was just starting, and maybe, just maybe, I could finally break free from the chains of the past and paint my future with the colors of freedom and courage. Sitting in the shade of a tree in the village square, I let the sounds around me envelop me. The laughter of children playing, the clinking of teacups from the tea vendors, and the murmurs of the elderly sharing stories about the past. I had always loved this place, but today, every laugh seemed to echo as a reminder of opportunities I had let slip away. My grandfather's letter was still fresh in my mind, his words resonating like a mantra. "It's never too late to follow your heart." But I recalled moments that had marked my life, especially the one when I received the opportunity to study art in a distant city. It was a unique chance, an invitation to explore new worlds. But overwhelmed by fear, I ended up declining. "Hui, you're not really going to pass it up, are you?" asked May, my childhood friend, as I hesitated, staring at the acceptance letter. Her voice was soft, but there was a firmness I couldn't ignore. "You have to go. You're an artist. The world is big and full of beauty waiting for you. May, I don't know. What if I'm not good enough? What if I don't fit in there?" Insecurity seeped into every word I said, and I saw frustration cross her face. "What if you fit in perfectly? What if you discover something you didn't even know you were looking for?" Sometimes we have to take risks, Hui. You can't let fear decide your future. The memories of that conversation dissolved into a mix of nostalgia and regret. And I realized that, like many in the village, I had allowed myself to be swept away by the chains of doubt. I stood up and walked through the square, my steps leading me to a group of friends I hadn't seen in years. They were gathered around a table, laughing and sharing stories about their lives. "Look who showed up. Hui, the village artist," one of them shouted, and everyone turned to me, smiles on their faces. It was good to be among them, but at the same time, a sense of disconnection began to grow in my chest. "Hey everyone, how are you?" I replied, trying to hide the confusion that consumed me. "We're good. What have you been up to? Any new paintings?" asked Lan, a friend who had always been the most curious of the group. "Actually, not much. I'm just thinking about life, you know," I replied evasively, feeling their gazes fixate on me. "Thinking about life? That's new. You've always been the one most dedicated to art," Wei joked, but there was a hint of concern in his voice. "Is everything okay, Hui?" "It's just that I feel like I'm wasting time," I confessed hesitantly. "I could have done more, traveled, studied elsewhere, but I ended up staying here." "You're not alone. I have regrets too," said May, who joined us. "I remember when I decided to stay home to take care of my sick father while all my friends were traveling and having adventures. Sometimes I wonder what it would have been like if I had gone." "That's true," Lan agreed. "Life is full of tough choices. Sometimes it feels like we're always making the wrong one." As we spoke, I realized that everyone carried their own burdens of regrets and uncertainties. It was a relief and yet a heavy load. I was struck by the idea that it wasn't just me, it was all of us, navigating this sea of choices, trying to find the right direction. "But what can we do now?" I asked, trying to understand how to deal with it all. "How can we change what we've already done?" "We can start living differently," Wei replied with a glint of determination in his eyes. "We can't change the past, but we can shape our future. What matters is that we're still here and we still have time." His words resonated within me. There was an implicit truth in the simplicity of that statement. I couldn't change what I hadn't done, but I still had the chance to do something new and different. I needed to find what truly made me happy, and that began with the courage to change. Maybe I should try again. "Travel, explore the world, paint what I see," I murmured, more to myself than to them. "It's what my grandfather always wanted me to do." May smiled and encouraged me. "Yes, Hui, you should. Don't let fear hold you back. Life is too short to be tied down by regrets. You need to go after what you love." The conversation flowed, and each person shared their hopes and dreams, as if we were opening a window to a brighter future. I was filled with a wave of optimism, a deep desire to break free from the bonds that held me. After a while, the energy of the group began to dissipate, and people started to disperse. May, however, stayed a little longer. "Hui, can I talk to you for a moment?" "Of course," I replied, feeling a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "I realize you're struggling with your choices, and I understand, because I am too. But you need to understand one thing. It's not about what you didn't do, it's about what you're going to do now. I know you have the talent and passion to be a great artist." I looked into her eyes and saw sincerity. May had always been one of the few who truly believed in me. "Thank you, May. Your words mean a lot. Sometimes I just need a push to remember who I am." "Then go ahead. Don't wait anymore. Do something that makes your heart sing. If you don't do this now, you might regret it even later." I knew she was right. With every conversation and every memory, I felt a growing urge inside me, a desire to finally take the reins of my life. It was time to make peace with my past and embrace the possibilities of the future. Saying goodbye to May, I walked home in a state of reflection. Night was falling, and the stars were beginning to shine in the sky. As I walked, my mind was filled with ideas and possibilities. My grandfather's letter was turning into a guide, a light illuminating my path. I didn't know exactly what the future held for me, but one thing was certain: I was determined to make changes. In my mind, I began to devise a plan. First, I would need to gather courage and resources, and more importantly, I would have to free myself from the fear that paralyzed me. When I finally got home, I sat down in my studio. The unfinished paintings that once brought me frustration now seemed full of potential. I picked up a brush, dipped it in paint, and let the color flow freely onto the canvas. The movement was like a dance, and with each stroke, I felt that I was not only creating art, but also my own life, full of possibilities. The night progressed, and I was far from finished. The transformation that had begun in my heart was now reflecting in every stroke I made. My grandfather always said that art is a way to express what we feel inside, and I was finally learning to express what was blossoming within me. And so, in that studio lit only by the soft light of the moon, I began to glimpse a future that, although uncertain, was filled with hope. The journey was just beginning, and I was ready to move forward. I woke up that morning with a racing heart, a mix of excitement and anxiety pulsing through my veins. The sun was already shining through the small window of my studio, and the golden light danced over the unfinished canvases surrounding me. The smell of fresh paint still lingered in the air, a reminder that no matter how much I had hesitated to follow the path of art, it had always been there, waiting for me. Today, however, was different. I had made a decision. It was time to leave, to break free from the ties that bound me to the village and seek what I truly desired, the world beyond the mountains that surrounded my home. With renewed energy, I got out of bed and headed to the table where my grandfather's letter still rested, like a talisman guiding me. Follow your heart, Hui. Do not fear the challenges. I could hear his gentle voice echoing in my mind. What would he have done if he were in my place? The answer seemed clear. I needed to go. I began to make a list of the things I needed to take. My brushes, some paints, sketchbooks, and of course the letter. It was important to keep Lao's words with me, like a beacon in the darkness. As I organized my belongings, each item seemed to tell a story. Each brush had a purpose, and each unfinished canvas represented an unrealized dream. Time passed quickly, and I barely noticed that morning had turned into afternoon. When I finally finished packing, a flutter of anxiety made me hesitate. What if I couldn't do it? What if life outside the village wasn't what I imagined? Fear began to creep into my mind, like a shadow that refused to disappear. I sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, and let doubt consume me for a moment. But then I remembered May, our conversation, and her encouraging words. You must not let fear dictate your choices, Hui. Life is too short to live with regrets. I got up, shaking off the uncertainty. No, I would not be a hostage to fear. I looked at the door, the exit to the unknown, and smiled. It was time to take a deep breath and take the first step. That night, as I prepared for sleep, anxiety accompanied me like an old friend. I lay down, but sleep would not come. I closed my eyes and let my thoughts swirl in my mind. My grandfather's letter was beside me, and I opened it once more, rereading his words. Each sentence seemed to vibrate as if Lao were there, urging me to move forward. What would he have done in a situation like this? I believe he would have faced everything with courage, even knowing that the path would be filled with challenges. With those thoughts, I finally managed to fall asleep, but not before dreaming of the landscapes that awaited me. Majestic mountains, dense forests, and vibrant cities all blended together in a whirlwind of colors and emotions. I woke up the next morning with a new sense of determination. It was the day of my departure. However, as I got up, reality hit me like a wave. An unexpected call from my brother made my heart stop for a moment. He was in a panic. "Hui, it's Mom. She's sick. I need you to come home," he said, his voice choked. The news left me paralyzed. A whirlwind of emotions rushed over me. The thought of leaving the village behind now felt cruel. How could I leave knowing that my mother needed me? Feeling the weight of responsibility, I began to question my choices. I looked out the window at the mountains I had always wanted to climb and the cities I had dreamed of knowing. But at the same time, the image of my mother, fragile and weak, filled my mind. It was a difficult choice, a battle between the desire for freedom and love for family. With a lump in my throat, I tried to process everything. I could be the artist I'd always dreamed of being, but what if something happened to my mother while I was away? Regret could consume me in a way I couldn't bear. I couldn't allow that. With determination, I took a deep breath and decided that I needed to stay. My mother has always been my biggest supporter, and now it was my turn to give back. I went to the kitchen, where the smell of freshly brewed tea filled the air. My mother always said that tea soothes the soul, and I needed all the calm I could find. I prepared a cup, and as the water boiled, I looked out the window again. The trees swayed gently in the wind, as if they were asking me to stay and face this new phase of life. The call of the world outside still echoed in my mind, but for now, I had a different path to follow. When my mother came home from the hospital, I found her sitting in the living room chair, looking tired, but with a smile on her lips when she saw me. Approaching her, I hugged her as if I were trying to transfer all the strength I had. "Wei, my son, you don't need to worry about me. I'm fine now," she said, caressing my face with her trembling hand. But I knew she was just trying to comfort me. "I want you to know that I will be here for you, no matter what happens," I replied, my voice heavy with emotion. There was so much love between us, but there was also a weight on my shoulders, the feeling that I was leaving a part of myself behind. In the following days, I took care of her with affection, trying to repay all she had done for me throughout my life. I painted when I could, but art now had a new meaning. Each brushstroke was a way to express the gratitude I felt for having the chance to care for the woman who had always supported me. It was an act of love, and slowly I realized that perhaps true art wasn't just in grand journeys and beautiful landscapes, but also in the small moments we build with those we love. As I cared for my mother, the colors of my world began to blend. The anxiety for the trip and the desire to explore were replaced by a new purpose. I needed to be present, not just as a son, but as an artist who found beauty in the simplicities of life. And who knows, maybe the trip I longed for could wait a little longer. The world would still be there when I was ready to discover its wonders. Life, like art, is made of choices, and I was beginning to understand that each one shaped who I was. Even amid uncertainty, there was beauty in staying, in loving, and in caring. And who knows, maybe one day I could travel, not just to seek new landscapes, but to carry my story and the lessons I learned from my mother and my grandfather. The journey was not just about the destination, but about the people we meet along the way. With this new perspective, I smiled at my mother, a smile that carried hope and gratitude. "Shall we make some tea?" I asked, and she nodded, her eyes shining. As we prepared the tea, I realized that even without traveling, life offered me a miracle every day. The decision to stay was an internal struggle. I looked out the window of my small studio, admiring the village landscape. The mountains in the background, imposing and eternal, reminded me of the dreams I'd always carried, but that now seemed so distant. The sun shone, and the vibrant colors of nature seemed to call to me. However, the weight of responsibility on my shoulders was undeniable. My mother needed me, and I couldn't abandon her. While I cared for her, I rediscovered the beauty that had always surrounded me. It was as if life had a new palette of colors, and I, a new brush. Each day when I helped her get out of bed or prepared the herbal tea she loved so much, I saw the light in her eyes rekindle, and with it, my own inspiration blossomed. The smell of fresh tea mingled with the aroma of paint and paper in my studio, creating a unique atmosphere that made me want to paint once more. "Wei, can you help me look at the flowers in the garden?" my mother asked softly, almost pleading. "Of course, Mom," I replied, with a smile that tried to hide my apprehension. I took her to the door, and when I opened it, the world outside revealed itself in all its glory. The flowers were in full bloom, and butterflies danced around them. Looking at the scene, I was overcome by a wave of emotion, a mix of love and nostalgia. The garden was one of the places my grandfather always tended with such care. "Look, Mom, the flowers are so beautiful," I pointed, trying to capture the joy I felt in that moment? Yes, they are. She smiled, and for a brief moment the sadness that surrounded her seemed to dissipate. Do you remember when your grandfather used to paint here? He always said that nature was his greatest inspiration. Her words touched me deeply. I had never associated the beauty of our garden with my grandfather's work. Memories of that time began to surface, and an overwhelming desire to express it all on a canvas took over me. "I'm going to paint this," I exclaimed, feeling a fiery impulse. "I will capture the beauty of our garden just like he would." "That would be wonderful, Hui," my mother replied, her eyes shining. "He would love to see you following in his footsteps." With a new purpose, I rushed back to the studio. I grabbed the paints, brushes, and a blank canvas. The idea of capturing the essence of our garden gave me renewed energy. I began to outline the shapes of the flowers, lighting up the sky with vibrant shades of blue and yellow. As I painted, I lost track of time. Each brushstroke seemed to tell a story, an echo of my grandfather's wisdom. However, even as I immersed myself in art, the restlessness about the future still consumed me. The desire to travel and explore the world continued to burn within me. And at the same time, I felt I needed to stay. It was an agonizing dilemma. On a sunny morning while I was painting, my mother entered the studio and watched me in silence. The smell of paint and the soft music I had put on the radio created an almost magical atmosphere. "Hui, you are so focused," she said, with a serene smile. "Mom, I'm trying to capture the beauty that is here, before me," I replied, not taking my eyes off the canvas. "And you are doing a wonderful job." She came closer, admiring the work. "But don't forget to look inside yourself too." Her words were like a reminder. I was so focused on painting the exterior that I had forgotten to explore my own essence. What did I really want? What made me happy? The questions swirled in my mind like leaves in the wind. It was then that I noticed an old painting in a corner of the studio. It was a piece by my grandfather, a landscape he had painted years ago. The color palette was vibrant, and the light seemed to dance on the canvas. I was drawn to it, as if being called by a distant voice. "Mum, do you remember this painting?" I asked, holding up the canvas. She approached, her eyes shining as she recognized it. Oh, how I loved this piece. He always said that the sunlight has the power to transform everything it touches. She sighed, lost in memories. "What do you think he felt when he painted it?" I asked, curious. "He always said that art was a form of freedom, Hui. He saw beauty where many did not. And he had a dream of traveling, of experiencing new places and cultures. But life sometimes leads us down unexpected paths." My mother's words were like a balm for my restless soul. My grandfather, like me, had his own dreams and desires. But he also valued his role in the family, caring for everyone around him. It was a lesson I needed to learn. As I looked at the painting, I realized that true beauty was not just in traveling, but in finding meaning in the small things. Love, family, home. These were the colors that truly filled the canvas of life. "Mum, I promise that when you recover, I will travel, but not before doing what is necessary here," I declared firmly. She smiled, her eyes filled with gratitude. "That is all I could wish for, Hui. You are already an artist, even without leaving this village." Those words echoed in my heart. I didn't need to leave to find inspiration. It was already there, in every smile, in every flower in the garden, in every lesson from my grandfather. Art was not just about exploring the world, it was also about exploring the life I already had. In that moment of clarity, something inside me changed. I realized that the choices I had made throughout my life were important, but what truly mattered was how I would live from them. Love and family were priceless, and I was determined to cherish every moment. As the weeks passed, my mother began to recover. and I continued to paint. Each canvas became a reflection of what I felt and what I learned from my grandfather. Life in the village was transforming, and with it, my heart. I kept capturing the beauty around me, and slowly, the restlessness that consumed me began to dissipate. It was clear that I still had a journey ahead, one I would take, but not without honoring everything that was important. And so, with the sunlight illuminating the canvas before me, I knew that more than any destination, the path I chose should be walked with love and gratitude. The sunlight began to stream through the window of my studio, illuminating the walls covered in paint and brushes as I mentally reviewed the past months of my life. My mother's health had finally improved, and I now found myself on the verge of realizing a dream I had postponed for so long. The idea of traveling to the city I had always dreamed of filled me with a mix of anxiety and excitement. However, something in my chest still pulsed, as if I were about to embark on a journey much greater than a simple trip. While organizing my things, the old box I had found in the attic, belonging to my grandfather, caught my attention again. I remembered the first letter I had read, full of wisdom and love. But as I looked back at the box, I realized there was something more inside. With trembling hands, I opened the lid, and to my surprise, another letter was hidden at the bottom, almost as if it had been waiting for me. I murmured to myself, "Come on, Hui. What are you waiting for?" As I pulled the letter out. The paper was slightly yellowed, but the words were still legible. I sat on the floor, letter in hand, and began to read. "My dear grandson, if you are reading this, it means that time has passed and perhaps you are facing your own challenges. I always believed that living is an art, and each of us is an artist shaping our own life. Sometimes the choices we make may seem wrong or even regrettable, but it is important to understand that every decision teaches us something. I also had my regrets, and if I could go back, I would do some things differently. However, that does not mean that I did not love the choices I made. Life is made of ups and downs, and it is in moments of pain that we find the true beauty of our being. Do not be afraid to make mistakes, for that is how you will find your way. Go, my grandson, and live fully. The colors of the world are more vibrant than you can imagine, and your art is the expression of what you feel. Never forget that true freedom lies in allowing yourself to feel." My grandfather's words reverberated in my mind, and a wave of emotions hit me. I felt as if he were there with me, listening to my fears and celebrating my victories. The letter spoke not only of regrets, but of the beauty of life and the importance of accepting flaws as part of a whole. I need to do this, I thought, as determination grew inside me. I stood up, now with renewed purpose, and began to pack my things for the trip. I thought of my mother, who had always been my support, and how I would leave her now, but not before ensuring that she was okay. When I entered her room, I found her sitting on the bed, looking out the window. "Mum, are you feeling better?" I asked with a smile on my face. She turned to me, and her eyes shone with a warmth that always warmed my heart. "I am, my son. The days have been easier, and I feel that soon I will be completely recovered." She smiled, and I saw the reflection of the strength that always characterized her. "I am thinking of traveling, Mom, to the city I have always dreamed of." The words came out of me like a soft sigh, mixing anxiety and joy. "Oh, Gray, that's wonderful. You've always wanted to see the world beyond our village. Go, my son, and do what your heart desires," she replied, her voice full of encouragement, but I noticed a hint of worry in her eyes. "I don't want to leave you, Mom. What if something happens and you need me?" I asked, doubt starting to take over. She got up and came to me, wrapping me in her arms. "You will always be my son, and I will always be here. Your happiness is what matters most to me. Go and paint the world with your colors. I will be cheering for you." Those words were like balm for my soul. I looked at her and realized that even though our connection was strong, I needed to allow myself that freedom. I needed to explore not just the world, but also myself. That day, with the new letter in hand and my mother's support in my heart, I began to pack. Each item I placed in my backpack seemed to carry a story, a piece of my life that I was about to leave behind, even if temporarily. The paints, brushes, and sketchbooks were more than simple tools. They were an extension of my essence, a representation of who I truly was. As I organized my things, a thought occurred to me. The art I would create in the city would not just be a form of expression, but a way to connect with what I truly desired. I wanted to capture the beauty of the streets, the lives of the people, and the vibrant colors that inhabited the world beyond my village. When night fell, I sat at the table, reflecting on everything that had happened. With the soft light of the lamp illuminating the room, I wrote a few words in my diary, expressing my gratitude for the journey I was about to begin. "I am ready," I wrote. "I am ready to live fully." The next day, the sun rose radiant, and I knew it was time to leave. I went to my mother's room to say goodbye. She was sitting on the bed, and upon seeing me, her smile lit up the room. "Are you ready, my son?" she asked, with a sparkle in her eyes. "Yes, Mom. I am ready to explore and create," I replied, with a confidence I hadn't felt before. "Then go, and remember that I will always be here cheering for you. And don't forget to send me letters with your paintings and stories," she said, with a hint of humor in her voice. "I promise I will do that. And when I come back, I will bring many stories and paintings to share," I replied, hugging her warmly. With a full heart and my backpack on my back, I headed towards the door. The wind blew gently, as if giving me one last push. As I walked through the village, I looked back and saw my mother waving. The warmth of her presence accompanied me, and I knew that this trip was just the beginning of a new journey, not only geographic but inner as well. And so, with my grandfather's words echoing in my mind and my mother's support in my heart, I left my village behind, determined to paint the world with the colors of my soul. The future awaited me, and I was ready to embrace it with open arms. As soon as I arrived in the city, a whirlwind of emotions took over me. It was as if I had stepped out of a bubble of familiarity and entered a completely new and unknown world. The streets were bustling, filled with hurried people, honking cars, and the smell of street food filling the air. The contrast with the tranquility of my village was striking. The first step I took on the sidewalk felt like a milestone, a passage between who I was and who I could become. As I walked, my mind was crowded with thoughts and expectations. What was I hoping to find? What did this trip really mean for me? With each step, a growing anxiety manifested in my chest. I decided I needed to distract myself, so I looked for an art gallery I had read about. Art had always been an escape for me, a refuge where I could lose myself and find myself at the same time. Upon entering the gallery, I was enveloped by a respectful silence. The white walls enhanced the displayed works, and a soft light illuminated the paintings. I walked slowly, observing each painting, each brushstroke, each emotion captured on a canvas. But amid all this, something caught my attention. One painting in particular seemed to attract me like a magnet. It was a serene scene of a village by a lake, with majestic mountains in the background. The use of colors, the way the light danced on the surface of the water, left me breathless. As I approached the painting, my heart raced. The style was unmistakably that of my grandfather Lao. I knew he had painted this landscape many times throughout his life, but seeing one of his works displayed in a gallery made me feel a mix of pride and nostalgia. I hadn't expected to find such an intimate part of my history here among strangers. Do you know the artist? A soft voice interrupted my thoughts. She was an elegant woman with a curious look and a welcoming smile. "Yes, he is my grandfather," I replied, trying to control the emotion in my voice. "What an honor. He is a true genius." "This work is one of the most admired," said the curator, with a gleam in her eyes. "Unfortunately, he never had the courage to come back to this city after he moved. He always spoke about his village and how his art was inspired by his roots. He never returned?" The question slipped out of me, full of disbelief. My grandfather always talked about the importance of family and homeland, but I never knew he had left his town behind without a return. No, he made a choice. He dedicated his life to art, but he also lived with a deep love for his home. He always said that distance made memory richer. The curator looked at me as if she were trying to grasp the depth of my emotions. "If you want, I can show you other works of his. Your family's legacy is admired and respected here." I accepted her invitation with a nod. As she guided me through the gallery, a new light began to shine in my heart. Through the stories she shared, I realized that my grandfather did not regret his choices. He had followed his path, even with the pain of longing. Each brushstroke was an expression of love, not just for art, but for the life he chose. That revelation made me question my own journey. I had sought freedom in a physical trip, but what I really needed was an inner journey. I remembered the letter I found, the words of wisdom my grandfather had written. He taught me the importance of following my heart and not fearing choices, for they shape who we are. Instead of feeling lost, I realized I was exactly where I needed to be. This city, these people, this gallery, all of it was connected to me and the legacy I carried. "Are you thinking about something?" the curator asked me with a perceptive look. "Yes," I said hesitantly. "I'm trying to understand what all of this means to me. I feel like this journey is more about discovering who I am than about visiting places." She smiled, as if she had heard that reflection many times before. Art has that power. It connects us to our deepest feelings. Sometimes a painting can teach us more than 1,000 words. As we spoke, I realized there was beauty in every choice I made, even those that seemed wrong. Every step I took, every hesitation, all led me to this moment. My grandfather may have left the city, but his art and wisdom remained. He lived fully, and now I had the chance to do the same. "Have you ever thought about following in his footsteps?" the curator asked, breaking my reverie. "Art is a powerful way to express yourself and connect with the world. Actually, I've always dreamed of traveling and painting, but I let life and obligations take me away," I confessed, a weight lifting off my chest. "Now I am here, trying to understand what is really important. Then maybe this is your chance," she suggested, with an encouraging smile. "Life is made of choices, and each one is an opportunity for growth. Your grandfather made his choices, and now you have the opportunity to make yours." Those words resonated within me like a distant but powerful echo. I realized that the true journey I needed to take was not just about exploring the physical world, but about exploring what was inside me. My grandfather had left me a legacy of love for art and life, and I could not waste that inheritance. At the end of the gallery visit, I said goodbye to the curator with a lighter heart. The city now seemed less daunting, more like a place of possibilities. I felt that regardless of what I decided to do next, I would carry my grandfather's spirit with me. He had lived without regrets, and I wanted to do the same. With a genuine smile, I realized I was ready to start painting my own story, free of fears and open to the future. Now, let's take a brief reflection. How many times have we set aside our dreams and desires for fear of failing or feeling trapped by our responsibilities? The letter from Hui's grandfather teaches us that life is a blank canvas, and it is up to us to paint that canvas with courage, accepting mistakes as part of the journey. True freedom comes when we can face our fears and find the balance between following our dreams and valuing those we love. Leave your thoughts about this story in the comments. What lesson did you take from it for your own life? Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, full of wisdom and inspiration. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you won't miss the next deep and revealing reflections. Until the next video, or if you prefer, keep watching our videos and be surprised by other equally beautiful and meaningful stories.